Israel declares readiness for a third attack against Iran. There's now a frightening silence in the Middle East. Everyone has their finger on the trigger. And when I say everyone, I mean everybody. Iran threatens Israel, saying, "We will teach Tel Aviv a lesson." An unprecedented crisis is taking place. The rift between Saudi Arabia and the United States is deepening. Is this bin Salman against Trump? Today, we will bring you all the information about the Saudi break that shook the Gulf. Israel imposed sanctions on Iranian crypto wallets that were used to fund the Hezbollah terrorist organization with millions. And meanwhile, the IDF is tightening the siege on Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon. Iran announces the round of negotiations in Doha has ended. An initial agreement was reached on releasing funds to Iran. And according to reports, Iran and the United States agreed on releasing $3 billion to Tehran, a shakeup at the top of Iran. Mustafa Khamenei removes a senior figure in the Iranian ruling system. The framework of the agreement with Israel places Lebanon before the greatest decision in its history. High alert in the Arabian Sea. An American helicopter landed on the waters. An American soldier is missing. And Iran returns to exporting oil. 40 million barrels in 2 weeks and a 20% premium. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We're here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is June 2nd, and I'm coming to you from Switzerland. So let's begin. Because one American soldier is defined as missing, and 3 additional soldiers were injured in stable condition after the United States Navy MH-60S Seahawk helicopter carried out an emergency landing on Wednesday in the Arabian Sea. The United States military emphasized that at this stage, there is no indication that this was an external attack. In the statement from the United States Fifth Fleet, it was said that American naval forces operating in the sea are continuing the search for the crew and the air crew members who were still missing. There's 1 crew member still missing. It was also stated that the circumstances of the incident are being examined and that the helicopter was operating in the area from the aircraft carrier USS George W. Bush. The incident is taking place while the United States forces in the region are on high alert against the background of localized outbreaks of violence during the ceasefire between the United States and Iran. Let us all pray together for the American soldier, that God will help him be found and send much strength to his friends and families. And this unusual event is taking place against the background of the tense negotiations between Iran and the United States. So look, the tension between Israel and Iran continues to escalate. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi sharply attacked the Defense Minister Israel Katz and warned that any attack on Iran's leadership would be met with an immediate and powerful response. Earlier today, indirect talks between the United States and Iran opened in Doha, Qatar, in the shadow of dramatic reports about President Donald Trump's intentions to renew the fighting. The president held discussions with the heads of the American defense establishment about the possibility of broad strikes. The central disputes are freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and restrictions on Tehran's nuclear program. The Iranian deputy foreign minister announced the end of the round of talks in Doha, which dealt with claims of the United States violations of commitments in the agreement to end this war. The sides agreed on establishing an immediate communication channel to monitor the violations. The Iranian delegation emphasized that the clauses of the Memorandum of Understanding are one package and cannot be separated. And at the same time, the President of the United States expressed optimism regarding the technical talks in Doha, Qatar, and noted that the process of dismantling nuclear weapons is progressing as planned. And earlier, it was reported in the Wall Street Journal that Trump considered renewing the full-scale war against Iran, but at this stage chose to continue the diplomatic efforts and give the talks another chance. And within these talks, an initial agreement was reached on the release of $3 billion from Iran's frozen funds. According to the reports, Iran conditioned any progress at every stage of the negotiations on the gradual release of the funds. And at the same time, Iran threatens Israel, saying, "We will teach Tel Aviv a lesson." The Iranian foreign minister issued a harsh threat towards Israel following the remarks of Defense Minister Israel Katz, while in Qatar it was reported that a principled agreement had been reached between Washington and Tehran on releasing frozen assets in the amount of $3 billion. And at the same time, the contacts continue around the future of the Strait of Hormuz. In a post that he published on X, Abbas Araghchi referred to the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed in Islamabad and claimed that its terms are clear and binding. He then attacked the connection between Israel and the United States, called Israel the president's pets in Tel Aviv, and threatened that Iran will teach them a lesson if they act against it. The remarks came after Defense Minister Israel Katz declared that Israel had attacked twice in Iran and would do so again in the future if necessary. Katz emphasized that Israel will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, and that the IDF will continue to operate also in the areas of Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. Alongside the verbal confrontation, El Arabiya reported initial progress in the indirect contacts between the United States and Iran in Doha, Qatar. According to the report, a principled agreement was reached to release about $3 billion from the frozen Iranian assets, and according to the sources, the release of the funds will be carried out in stages, with each installment depending on future progress in the negotiations. One of the central issues that remains in dispute is the future of the Strait of Hormuz. This is after Oman presented a new framework to regulate the security situation in the strategic maritime route. Following the developments, the American and the Iranian delegations are expected to return for consultations in their countries before the next round of talks resumes. And meanwhile, it was reported in the Wall Street Journal that President of the United States Donald Trump examined in recent days the possibility of renewing broad strikes against Iran. But at this stage, he chose to continue the diplomatic efforts, even before the timetable set for the agreement. And at the same time, it was revealed that Trump was forced to shelve Project Liberty, the ambitious military operation that intended to break the Iranian blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. According to the report, the reason was direct and unprecedented pressure from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And according to the investigation, the American plan called for close military escort of commercial ships through the critical shipping route, where about 1,500 ships are currently trapped because of Tehran's blockade. But the operation was suddenly suspended, only 36 hours after it got on its way. The reason? The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman issued a dramatic ultimatum. According to the report, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait blocked American access to military bases and to their airspace as a protest against the conduct of the United States of America. The Saudi move created one of the most serious and surprising crises in Washington-Riyadh relations in recent years. It threatened to harm the historic defense alliance between the two countries. The Americans even threatened to reduce the military presence in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The Wall Street Journal reported that only after a second phone call between President Trump and Crown Prince bin Salman was a compromise reached that allowed the renewal of the American access to the bases, but at the price of shelving the operation to open up the strait. And meanwhile, Iran is taking advantage of the relief that has been recorded in the Persian Gulf. In Tehran, they claim that since the removal of the American maritime blockade, about 2 weeks ago, the country has exported more than 40 million barrels of oil. According to tanker tracking companies, the export volume may even approach 50 million barrels. For Iran, this is a rapid return of the central source of income, after a period in which the oil ports were restricted and export almost completely stopped. Tens of millions of barrels were sold within a short time and may generate revenues of billions of dollars even after insurance costs, transport, and discounts to the buyers. And after months of nerve-wracking waiting, Iran is revealing the details of the giant funeral of Ali Khamenei and sending a resounding diplomatic message. 4 months after the elimination of the supreme leader at the beginning of the war, Iran is preparing for an event intended to close an area and demonstrate uncompromising power before the entire world. With an unusual forecast of up to 35 million participants and unprecedented security readiness, Tehran is polishing itself for the farewell for Ali Khamenei, for his ceremony, the burial ceremony of the former supreme leader. And within this, a shakeup at the top of Iran is taking place. According to a report in the Iranian opposition, Supreme Leader Mustafa Khamenei is planning not to extend the term of the head of the judiciary, Ghulam Hussein Husseini Ejei. The move, if carried out, is expected to be part of the reorganization of the centers of power in Iran and the appointment of senior officials more loyal to the new leadership. And this brings us back to Lebanon. The framework agreement between Israel and Lebanon is not only a new security arrangement, it is a historic test for the future of the Lebanese state. Its supporters see it as an opportunity to restore sovereignty and reduce Iran's influence. The commander of CENTCOM arrived in Lebanon in order to establish a coordination mechanism with the IDF. Admiral Brad Cooper's visit was intended to accelerate the establishment of the pilot zones for the IDF's withdrawal. And meanwhile, in the camp of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, they're trying to form an internal front in Lebanon against the agreement. But so far, they're running into difficulties. And on the ground, IDF forces operating in Lebanon have thwarted in recent days several Hezbollah attempts to reach the terrorists that are trapped inside the underground compound on the Ali Taner Ridge in southern Lebanon and to assist them. This is a historic, strategic stay and command compound, which includes a branch tunnel network through which the terrorist organization managed its southern command in Lebanon. Between 30 and 40 terrorists are staying inside this compound. The construction of the infrastructure was funded by Iran, and Hezbollah sees the struggle over the place as a symbol. Because of the strategic importance of the compound, the IDF decided not to give up its hold on this area until its complete destruction. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, held his first visit to the area that is controlled by the IDF in southern Lebanon. And during the visit, he received a security briefing on the activity of the forces, on the struggle against Hezbollah's tunnels, and on the continuation of the Israeli hold in the area until the threat is removed. And will the IDF fighting in Gaza resume? The Southern Command of the IDF has completed the operational plans for renewing the fighting in the Gaza Strip, but the political echelon instructed the IDF to focus efforts on the northern and the eastern arenas. So there's a lot ahead of us. So let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and about this war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And just before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get a view through our eyes of what it's like to live in Israel under this war. Because while the world debates politics, Christians in Nigeria are being slaughtered. Villages are under attack. Homes are burned to the ground. Pastors are murdered. Families running for their lives in the middle of the night. This isn't history. This is happening right now. And most of the world is silent or doesn't even know what's going on there. That's why equipping the persecuted exists. Within hours of every kind of attack, equipping the persecuted is sending their teams to the ground to deliver emergency medical care, food, and support to families who have lost everything. But they don't stop there. They train local security teams. They establish early warning systems. and help protect entire villages from the next attack. They care for the widows. They protect the orphans. They stand in the gap when no one else will. Last year alone, over 100,000 lives were impacted, but the attacks are increasing and the need is urgent. So you can help right now by donating at persecuted.com/TBN. Again, that's persecuted.com/TBN. Make a donation, save lives, and let's get back to the news. And now, we will move to our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani. And Mati, is the crisis between Saudi Arabia and the United States a sign that even Washington's allies no longer trust Trump to manage the confrontation with Iran without burning their security? And does this indicate that bin Salman is afraid of the regional price of an open war?
This whole story with Saudi Arabia, where reportedly during Operation Freedom, they tried to actively block the U.S. from using their country, their airports, their airfields, their ports as a launching pad for protective operations against Iran. This is a very, very concerning story. It's concerning on multiple levels. The top tier, the most visible layer of the concern I would have here is the fact that it shows us how successful Iran has been in threatening, in terrorizing their neighbors. Now, why do I say this? Think about Saudi Arabia for just a second. An immense, a powerful, a very wealthy country that has its own army. Not only that, they have a very deep relationship with the United States in general, and specifically with President Donald Trump. And despite that background, and despite the fact that they requested, they desired, they asked for U.S. presence on the ground in their country, they asked for U.S. protection and U.S. defensive measures to be deployed in their country. Despite all of that, they still pushed back when the U.S. was going to go against Iran based in Saudi Arabia. And the reason is not that they were opposed for American policy, the reason is that they are afraid of Iran. And this is the terrible part of asymmetrical warfare. Despite the fact that the U.S. is much stronger, despite the fact that the U.S. has shown, superiority when it comes to every possible aspect, both military, financial, geopolitical, on every possible level, the U.S. has shown superiority. And yet, despite all of that, Iran is still scarier to the Saudis. And by extension, Iran is still scarier to the Qataris, the Omanis, the Emiratis, maybe to a lesser degree. I'll get to that in a second. Now, Saudi Arabia has played this game in the past too. This isn't pure fear, and it also isn't pure politics. They, for many, many years, have tried to figure out what the best alliance is. And I need to remind you that under the Biden administration, following the assassination of Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist outside of Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, if I recall correctly, the U.S. almost severed its ties and lowered the level of its diplomatic ties with the Saudis because of the human rights violations that the government was carrying out. And when that happened back then, the Saudis went and started formalizing relationships with other countries as if to signal to the U.S. administration that we're not wholly, not completely, not only dependent on you. So we need to remember that background to the story. But the scary thing here, the concerning thing here, the point to really delay on is a situation related to Iran. Iran, with an inferior army, has been able, with their threats of violence and terrorism, to scare their neighbors sufficiently that they would not want to partner, not want to work together with the United States. Operation Freedom is a great example of that. The U.S. said, we're gonna blitz through Iranian lines. We're gonna blitz through Iranian defenses in the Strait of Hormuz. And if they try to attack ships, we will make sure that those ships are safely passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And they called on many countries, both the Gulf states and European countries, to work alongside them. Now, technical difficulties aside, and the fact that most European countries at this point would have substantial trouble fielding any kind of substantial naval power in real time to the Gulf, aside from that point, many countries responded in fear to that proposition. Many countries responded with huge amounts of concern over the fact that they don't want to go up against the Iranians. They're comfortable asking the U.S. for protection. They're comfortable to have the U.S. fight their wars for them, but they're very uncomfortable being the ones on the forefront of that war. And I need to tell you, if I lived in a Gulf state, I might share that opinion. It takes a whole lot of bravery and a whole lot of courage to assume that the US and you would have the upper hand against Iran. Because even though Iran lost the war, they know that it doesn't take much to stop the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. And even though the US has a substantial, significant military presence, it's still not overwhelming enough to prevent every last boat and every last drone from attacking your oil tankers specifically because you went out against Iran publicly. And that is the story with Saudi Arabia. This isn't necessarily a story about politics, although of course politics are involved. It's not a power struggle between MBS and Trump, although of course there's always a power struggle taking place between powerful country leaders. That is in the background. The main story here is the fact of stabilizing the region, stabilizing the Persian Gulf, stabilizing the Strait of Hormuz. And the reality here is complicated. If Iran does not have a substantial military presence of American forces on its coast, it will indefinitely be able to jeopardize ships traveling through that strait. And the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Omanis and the Kuwaitis, they all know this and they act accordingly. They say to the US, we're 100% supportive. We fear, we loathe, we have a whole lot of problems with the Iranians. But do we want to be their target? Do we want them to focus on us for the retaliation? Perhaps not. An exception to all of that is the UAE. The UAE, who's made public repeatedly in this war the fact that they went and attacked Iranian targets. But they came from a different perspective. They realized, or they came to the conclusion, that they must stand up and fight for themselves to make sure that Iran does not threaten them in the future or realizes that they will fight back. But it was mostly symbolic, mostly small, mostly on a strategic level insignificant, even though it does make a loud message or send a loud message to Iran. What's the story here? The story here is that signing a deal with Iran has proven to be almost impossible. And yet the Iranians have been successful also at scaring their neighbors sufficiently that those neighbors refuse to actively participate and partake in the war against their enemy, Iran. And that leaves the US in a very problematic situation. The US needs to win. It needs to win conclusively, and it needs to be able to show the Iranians that they can bring peace and order to that region of the Middle East. And if that doesn't happen, then we're in a problem, because the entire prestige of the US fighting force relies on the fact that that massive army, that massive Navy, that massive Air Force is able, massive Marines, of course, are able to fight against Iran and beat them. Who's looking at this? The Russians are looking at this to decide what they're going to do with the Ukraine. And the Chinese are looking at this to decide what they're going to do in the South China Sea, and of course, versus Taiwan. This affects everyone, and that's why this is so important, so crucial, so unpleasant of a conflict. The US knows this. That's why they're doubling down both on the negotiation and the military pressure, but also the Iranians know this. And that's why they are being so belligerent and so, well, let's just give it to them. They're showing such a level of resolve in sustaining a beating from the United States, both financially and militarily, because they know that if they survive, that in itself is a win. And that's a complicated reality we must face right now in the Middle East.
Mati, has Iran found its most dangerous formula so far? Do not start a full war, but to earn money, time, and oil under the constant threat of war?
That is a great question, because it exposes the very dangerous, doctrine that the Iranian regime is carrying out right now versus Israel and the United States. Because the traditional methodology, the traditional process would require the following. You end hostilities, the war ends, you sign an agreement, you move on with your life. But what if Iran doesn't actually want to end the war, ever? What if Iran doesn't actually plan, have the ability or the desire to actually sign an agreement? Where does that take us? To a forever war against Iran? Does the US have that capability? Does Israel have that desire? Those are very, very difficult and, painful questions, because the reality on the ground is that the Iranians have shown us several different things in recent months. And by extension, if you really follow their track record over the last 20 plus years, it really informs how they operate. And the following is their modus operandi. They continuously lie, they continuously deceive, and they push only for one agenda and one agenda only. Strengthen the government, the regime in Iran, continue building their tools of destruction, the ballistic missile program, the nuclear program, the proxy warfare, and now their new favorite tool in the arsenal, which is closing up the Strait of Hormuz. That's the painful reality of the way these people have been operating. And it is, well, it's concerning because it works. That's why it's concerning. They are continuously able to draw out the negotiations while they cause damage. Now, for a while there, several months actually, the US was able to impose a substantial military blockade on Iran. And that blockade cost them a lot of money. But we're sort of moving past that point. And the blockade is easing on Iran and other countries by reports that we're hearing, which means that the Iranians are starting to make money again. We also know that the US has become far more lenient and reserved in their responses to Iranian violations of the ceasefire, whether done domestically near Iran or in other countries. And what that tells the Iranians is that they can continue pushing and pushing as long as the guise of a negotiation, quote unquote, is taking place. And this is a very concerning process or trend, because what if this happens continuously? What if we have now months of this or years of this, of a so-called ceasefire that isn't actually a ceasefire, of a so-called open Strait of Hormuz where it's not actually open and countries are paying a traverse or travel fee through the Strait of Hormuz, also known as paying protection to organized crime? That's what's happening there right now to Iran and to Oman, who've stated publicly that they're planning to collect a fee from the ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, which is both a sign of power and control, and of course a way to make money. So big problem all around. And what this really informs us is that we have to change methodology, is that the only method that works against Iran, and we've seen this consistently in recent months, is when the military campaign is at maximum pressure, when the financial pressure is at the highest level possible, and when those are combined with a very strong negotiation tactic. The minute you give them any kind of gap, any kind of opening, any kind of wiggle room, they go back to causing trouble. They go back to playing their dirty games. They go back to cheating and lying. And let me give you a little of a backstory here. Iran was supposed to cancel their nuclear military program multiple times. But if it wasn't for Mossad operations over a 20-year period, they would have already had a bomb more than a decade ago. That's the reality. And the same applies to many other fields of operation for them. If they weren't stopped time and time again by Israel intelligence and other countries' intelligence, then they would have long ago carried out a long series of terrorist attacks against Western targets around the world. This is the nature of the Iranian regime, and we need to recognize it as such. And therefore, the understanding of both their nature, their method of operation, and the fact that it serves their best interest to draw out this negotiation indefinitely, as long as there's not a lot of military pressure on them, that should inform us on what the next steps are. And the US needs to go back to what it did in Islamabad, Pakistan. Very, very, very strong negotiation tactics. When the Iranians play games, you withdraw from the negotiations. When they even blink at the wrong time, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz or otherwise, bang, military campaign on their head. That should be the methodology when it relates to Iran, because otherwise we're going to be where we are right now, but also in 6 months, in a situation where technically the Strait of Hormuz is open, but practically countries are paying, well, they're paying a fee to the Iranian regime to travel through the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran is free to trade and to sell oil, all the while jeopardizing global trade for other countries around them. That's the situation that is going to happen, and we simply can't allow that to be the scenario. And my prayer, my hope, my request to you guys to also pray and stand with Israel on this topic is to pray that the Trump government, the Trump White House, has enough resolve, has enough of a tailwind politically to really go all out against the Iranian regime and stop their reign of terror. We maybe can't replace their government right now, or are not willing to take the steps necessary to do that, but we can cause enough damage, enough pressure on them to create a substantial agreement. We can slow down their nuclear program, we can shut down their ballistic missile facilities, we can put financial chokeholds on their economy of exports of oils and the frozen assets they have elsewhere. There's a lot that can be done. We need the resolve to carry through on that topic. The flip side here is quite dramatic and quite negative. If we don't do that, if the US, if Israel are not strong against Iran, we're going to witness an Iran even stronger, an Iran even more belligerent, and Iran even more willing to violate every agreement and every term paper and every MOU that they've ever signed. And they've done this repeatedly in the past. And if we don't stop them, well, that is bad news for the world. That means in 12, 18, 24 months, we're back at the same place, fighting against an Iran that has rebuilt its army with cash that was given back to it from the United States. And if that sounds absurd to you, if that sounds bad to you, well, it should. We've been in this rodeo show before. We've seen this happen repeatedly in the past, under Biden, under Obama, even with Trump in a past term. It took too long for Western countries to understand what Iran was trying to do, how far they're willing to go in lying and deceiving any supervising mechanism that is placed on them, and how resolved and clear we need to be in not letting them get away with it. That is a simple truth. There are no pleasant truths here, and there are no easy outs from this equation. Only power, only violence, only pressure on Iran to prevent them from once again regaining power and going back to be the bully of the Middle East that they've been for so many years.
Mati, is the battle over the Ali Taher compound in southern Lebanon a greater test than all the political declarations? Because there, we will know whether Hezbollah has truly weakened or is only waiting for the diplomacy to save it.
There's this really bizarre story that happens every time that a terrorist organization seems to be almost broken, where suddenly countries around the world feel that now is the time to save the terrorists. And this is exactly the case right now in southern Lebanon. The IDF, according to multiple reports, has a whole lot of terrorists that are cornered in an underground bunker system in the southern part of Lebanon. And international organizations, including Hezbollah, the Iranians, their good friends and patrons, and several other human rights champions around the world are saying, here we know what the problem is. Israel is the problem. Let's call on Israel to stop attacking Hezbollah. Here's the reality. Hezbollah is an organization that has taken a beating from Israel. This war has seen Hezbollah sustain more casualties than in previous wars, even though it's much shorter and less and more limited in the scope of the warfare that's taking place. The IDF has taken notes. It has learned lessons. It's become far more effective in eliminating Hezbollah terrorists on the ground. In the past war, in Operation Midnight Hammer, in June of last year, 25, Israel carried out a lot of attacks. They used intelligence by the Mossad, such as the pager attack, the walkie-talkie attack, and the payphone attack. I'm just kidding, I just made the last part up. But the reality is we eliminated much of their terrorists by strategic attacks, but be them bombing attacks or aerial attacks. This time around, the IDF on the ground, working hand in hand with the Air Force, has been very lethal to Hezbollah terrorists in a good way for Israel. We've been eliminating their leadership and their soldiers on the ground on a daily basis. Hezbollah is very concerned, and there are Iranian overlords that have paid for all this goodness. The Hezbollah terrorist organization, they too are putting pressure to stop this. And Iran is hoping, and Hezbollah are hoping, that the diplomatic buzzer, that the ceasefire buzzer, well, that bell rings before Israel has caused more damage to the Hezbollah terrorist organization. That is the simple reality here. Now, behind the scenes, Israel, with the Lebanese government, together with the help of the United States, is trying to build up the Lebanese fighting force and the Lebanese government to fight on their own against the Hezbollah terrorists. But we're not there yet. Israel still needs to continue fighting, pressuring, harming Hezbollah terrorists. There is no other way to go about this right now. And what we need to make sure is that diplomatic conversation is honest and open. It names Hezbollah, terrorists that need to be removed from the country of Lebanon. It names the Iranians, the scorn, the engine behind the proxy warfare mechanism throughout the Middle East. And we need to be sure that we use the right language and spread the truth on this topic. Because the world wants you to think that Israel is just an aggressor perusing through southern Lebanon on a destruction mission to ruin the homes of innocent citizens or people of southern Lebanon. That's not the case. The IDF is traveling through southern Lebanon, destroying Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure that has been to the cost of billions of dollars only to harm the people of Israel. And Hezbollah wants you to think, and the Iranians want you to think, that we're just there to harm the people of Lebanon. Well, let me tell you a very well-known secret, that Hezbollah does not represent the people of Lebanon. Hezbollah is not a freedom fighter movement of the people of Lebanon. It is a paid proxy of the Iranians. They are Shia, they are local to Lebanon, but they're not a grassroots movement in the way they're trying to portray themselves. They are funded, they are trained, they are equipped by the Ayatollahs of Iran. That is the truth. And they use all their weapons and all their training not to liberate, not to build up, not to strengthen Lebanon, but to destroy Lebanon from within. And they've done so repeatedly over decades. And more importantly, to bring harm to the civilian population of Israel with the ultimate stated goal of destroying Israel. That's in common for Hezbollah, for Hamas, and for the Iranians. And given that fact, given that reality, why would you negotiate with these people? Why would you allow them to return to your border? The answer is clear, you wouldn't. If a terrorist organization has been launching thousands of missiles for decades to your civilian population, wherever you live in the world, and then says, you know what, let's have a ceasefire, let us come back to where we were previously, you would look at them as if they're insane. You'd say the same thing we said in Israel. We're not doing that again. We're not allowing terrorists to embed themselves on our borders once more. We will protect our borders. We will fight against the terrorists. We will eliminate those terrorists until they stop being a threat to the people of Israel. That's both our right as far as international law goes, but it's also a requirement for the Israeli government to uphold its pact with the Israeli people that the government protects the people against enemies from outside and enemies from within. And Hezbollah is exactly that. And Iran is exactly that. And we need to stand up and fight them and crush the terrorist organization until it is no longer a threat to the people of northern Israel. Full stop. No negotiation needed, no conversation needed. We need to rally up as many allies as we can, the Lebanese government, the Lebanese army, the United States and European countries, and remove the disease that is the Hezbollah terrorist organization from Lebanon once and for good. That should be the goal. No one should think of letting them remain. No one should think that before they are broken as an organization, we should suddenly be merciful to them and allow them to regain their power and rebuild so they can once again threaten and harm the people of Israel. Why should we do that? What is the logic with this conversation? And the answer is, there is no logic. We shouldn't do that. Israel should be supported in destroying the evil that is the Hezbollah terrorist organization, an organization that has killed countless Americans and Israelis and many other nationalities over the years with the stated goal of promoting their evil, evil agenda. There's no question about it. They've been open about it. They've been clear about it. And all we need to do is take them at their word. And their word says they will keep fighting until they destroy us. So we might as well destroy them before they get the chance of doing that once more.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. That really helped us better understand what we're dealing with. And to all of you, continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Look for Yair, Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts. Because a foreign container ship became stuck in the Strait of Hormuz after sailing through a route that was not designated by Iran. This is not just another small maritime incident. This is a clear Iranian message. Anyone who does not accept Tehran's new rules of the game could get stuck, be stopped, or become part of the next crisis. And the question now is simple. Is Iran using the ceasefire to reach an agreement or to turn Hormuz into a permanent economic weapon against the world? In Doha, the round of indirect talks between the United States and Iran has ended, but no one is really walking away calm. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharibabadi announced that the sides discussed what Tehran defines as American violations of the commitments in the Memorandum of Understanding, mainly around ending the war in Lebanon. The Iranian delegation emphasized that the commitments are one package, not separate clauses from which each side can choose what's convenient and what's not. In simple words, Iran is telling Washington, if you want quiet in Hormuz, you need to pressure Israel in Lebanon as well. If you want progress on the nuclear issue, you need to talk about the frozen money as well. And if you want the tankers to keep moving, you will need to take the conditions of the Revolutionary Guards into account. And during the talks, the sides agreed to establish an immediate communication channel for the monitoring group in order to report violations of the Memorandum of Understanding. That sounds technical, but in the Middle East, even a communicational channel like this can become an emergency line before fire is opened. Because underground, every small incident can become a major crisis. A ship that strays from the route, an armed boat near Yemen, a drone over the Gulf, or a missile fired in response to a verbal threat. And while the talks in Doha are taking place, the Americans are projecting two opposite images. On one hand, President Trump says there was a good meeting with Iran, that the talks were moving very well, and that the goal is an orderly dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. On the other hand, around him, military discussions continue about returning to broad strikes against Iran if the negotiations fail. This is the pattern that Trump likes. Talk about the deal, keep the aircrafts ready, and make the other side understand that the diplomatic window is open, but not forever. Iran understands this, and that's why it is raising the price. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi harshly attacked Israel and the United States and warned that any threat against the Iranian people or the leadership of the Republic would be met with an immediate and powerful response. He also tried to present Israel as the side that Washington is obligated to restrain. This is not just a diplomatic insult. This is a strategic claim. Iran wants the Americans to take responsibility for every Israeli action. And that brings us to the heart of the story, which is the Strait of Hormuz. The talks in Doha are focused on two heavy issues: frozen Iranian assets and control of the strait. According to the reports, there is consideration of releasing $3 billion from frozen Iranian funds, while Iran is demanding that the money be released in stages and tied to progress in each phase of the negotiations. The Americans say that the money will not be transferred freely to the regime, but only with approval and supervision for civilian needs. But for the Revolutionary Guards, the money is only one part of this equation. Hormuz is more important to them. Frozen money is released once. Control over a global maritime route gives leverage every single day. Iran is already selling the partial return of the movement in the Gulf as an achievement. In Tehran, they claim that since the removal of the American maritime blockade, Iran has exported more than 40 million barrels of oil in about 2 weeks. And tanker tracking companies estimate that the number may even approach 50 million. Parliament Speaker Muhammad Bakir Ghalibaf claimed that Iran is now selling oil at a premium of around 20% compared to the terms it received before this war. That matters because Iran is trying to turn the ceasefire into a cash machine. On one hand, it threatens shipping routes. On the other hand, it profits from the return of the tankers. And on the third track, it demands frozen funds. This is not only diplomacy. This is an economy under military threat. In the maritime arena, around Yemen, the picture adds another layer. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Agency reported that several small boats with armed men approached a vessel about 122 kilometers south of Balhaf. Later, there was another report of a small boat approaching a tanker from the port quarter at a distance of about 3 kilometers. There were no casualties, and the ship continued on its route. But this is exactly the method. You do not always need to sink a ship. Sometimes it's enough to approach, to scare, to raise the insurance costs, to change a route, and to signal to every shipping company that the area is unstable. And inside this tension, the unusual incident in the Arabian Sea also took place. A U.S. Navy MH-60S Seahawk helicopter carried out an emergency landing in the water. One American soldier is missing, and 3 others were injured in the stable condition. The U.S. Navy emphasized that at this stage there is no indication of hostile action, but the very fact that the incident is taking place during high alert in the area, near the aircraft carrier USS George W. Bush, it reminds us how crowded this area is. Ships, aircrafts, drones, tankers, helicopters, militias, and proxies all operating in the same nervous space. The crisis in Hormuz has also created the deep crack between Washington and Riyadh. Project Freedom, which was meant to secure commercial ships stuck in the strait, was stopped shortly after it began, after Saudi Arabia and Kuwait blocked the Americans from using airspace and bases. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman feared that the operation would drag the region into a broader war with Iran, and he held his position even during urgent calls with senior White House officials. This is a very significant moment. Saudi Arabia is a longtime ally of the United States, but it no longer behaves as if every American decision is an order. Riyadh is managing its own channels with Pakistan, China, and Iran, and it sees missile stockpiles, militias, and the danger of regional escalation as an immediate threat no less than the nuclear issue. When the American Secretary of State skipped Saudi Arabia during his visit to the Gulf, it no longer looked like a misunderstanding. It looked like a crisis of trust. What you see on YouTube is only part of the story. Get closer to first-hand reports, behind-the-scene moments, and stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel. Go to tbn.org/journeys/boots or text BOOTS to 316-316 for direct updates from TBN Israel. Of course, with Mati and myself, Yair Pinto, you get direct access to what's happening underground in the land of Israel. And our goal is for you to know what's happening and know how to pray for the situation, for the peace of Jerusalem. That's what we're doing, and we need your help. So you can help us by hitting the subscribe button, by leaving a comment, and let's get back to the news. Because Israel is drawing a clear line in the front, in the north and in the Gaza Strip. So in the north, Defense Minister Israel Katz said at the memorial ceremony for the fallen of the Second Lebanon War that we will not wait until the threat knocks on our doors. According to him, Israel has already struck twice in Iran with preemptive blows, and if necessary, it will strike for a third time. He added that the IDF will not withdraw from the security zone in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza without the time limit. As long as the threat to Israeli communities comes from there, the IDF will stay there. Prime Minister Netanyahu sharpened the same idea exactly. He said that Israel will not accept a reality in which a terror army builds tunnels that can penetrate our border, and that Israel will remain in the protected strip in southern Lebanon for as long as needed. His most important sentence was this: the Gaza envelope is now inside Gaza. The Lebanon envelope is now inside Lebanon. This is the new security doctrine. We do not wait for the enemy on the fence. We move the defensive line into the territory from which the threat comes. On the ground, this is already happening. On the Ali Tahrir Ridge in southern Lebanon, IDF forces have thwarted in recent days several Hezbollah attempts to reach terrorists that are trapped inside an underground compound and assist them. According to the Northern Command assessments, between 30 and 40 terrorists are inside this compound. This is a strategic stay and fight compound and infrastructure with a branch tunnel network. From this area, Hezbollah managed parts of its southern command in Lebanon. The infrastructure was funded by Iran, and Hezbollah sees the site as a symbol. That's why the IDF is not rushing to leave. It's holding the area until its complete destruction. And at the same time, Israel and the United States are working with the Lebanese army to establish a coordination mechanism. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper arrived in Lebanon in order to accelerate the creation of pilot zones for a controlled Israeli withdrawal. The idea is simple, but complicated to carry out, because the IDF evacuates a sector only when the Lebanese army is able to enter it, to hold it, and to prevent Hezbollah from returning. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam said in an interview in Lebanon a sentence that was unusually sharp. The parties that are firing need to stop firing. Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guards need to stop the fighting, not me. He also made clear that there are misconceptions around an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon within 60 days, and that such a thing does not appear in the text of this agreement. In other words, even in Beirut, they understand you cannot sell the public the illusion that Israel will withdraw while Hezbollah remains armed and ready. Hezbollah is trying to build a rejection front inside Lebanon. But it's not moving forward easily. There are parties that oppose the agreement and call it an agreement of disgrace. But there is also a Lebanese camp that understands that the real question is not Israel alone. The question is whether Lebanon is capable of returning to being a sovereign state or whether it remains an Iranian file inside negotiations between the powers. And at the same time, Israel is also hitting the money that keeps this axis alive. The Ministry of Defense exposed sanctions and imposed them on 37 Iranian crypto wallets in which digital currencies worth more than 24 million shekels were identified. The infrastructure, exposed in cooperation with the intelligence bodies, was used by the Revolutionary Guards to transfer terror funds to proxies in the region, including Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israeli Defense Minister Katz said it clearly: the campaign against Iran is not taking place only on the battlefield, but also in the fight over the money that drives terrorism. In the south, Gaza has not disappeared from the picture. It has simply moved down in the operational order of priorities in relation to Iran and Hezbollah. Southern Command has completed plans for renewing fighting in the Strip if necessary, but the political echelon has instructed the IDF to focus efforts on the northern and the eastern arenas. And meanwhile, in the Intelligence Directorate, they're identifying heavy economic pressure inside Hamas. Senior figures are resigning, salaries are not arriving, and the chain of command is being worn down. And still, Hamas is not sitting and waiting. According to a presentation that was prepared in the IDF, the organization is recruiting young men aged 18 to 22, training new Nukhba units, producing hundreds of explosive devices and rockets each month, and accelerating smuggling of drone parts and additional equipment. This is exactly why the IDF continues to operate along the yellow line in the Gaza Strip and to thwart immediate threats. And yesterday, in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, Adel Jihad Muhammad Asfour, a platoon commander in Hamas's military wing, was eliminated from the air. He advanced the planning of explosive devices against IDF forces throughout the war, and recently tried to restore the organization's capabilities and advance terror plans in the immediate time frame. The IDF and the Shin Bet defined him as a direct threat to the forces, and therefore he was removed from the equation. Inside Iran, the internal situation is no less tense. Tehran is preparing for the giant funeral of Ali Khamenei, who was eliminated in the opening strike of the war. According to Iranian preparations, millions are expected to take part in the ceremonies that will be held in several locations including Tehran, Qom, Iraq, and Mashhad. The slogan around the events is revenge, and the symbol is a clenched fist. More than 14,000 media personnel have registered to cover this event, including more than 900 foreigners, and the regime wants to turn the funeral into a global show of force. But behind the giant production, there is uncertainty. Mujtaba Khamenei is still barely appearing in public. And at the same time, reports are being published about his intention to replace the head of the judiciary, Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejai. If that happens, it will break a tradition of decades, a signal that Mujtaba is trying to clean out the centers of power and place personal loyalists in positions. All of this is happening while the regime projects strength outwards, but looks for stability inside. A giant funeral, talks in Doha, a struggle over Hormuz, a fight over the money, Hezbollah under pressure, Hamas trying to rebuild. All these pieces are connected to the same center. The Revolutionary Guards are trying to save the Iranian axis of influence before it falls apart. And this campaign does not remain only in the Middle East. In Toronto, a suspect was arrested after throwing stones at the Jewish man, shouting anti-Israel chants and threatening murder. Argentina's president, Javier Milei, said in a firm speech that Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah are the Amalek of our generation, and declared that Argentina has chosen to stand on the right side of history. The two events are completely different, but they remind us of one thing, that this war has long stopped being only about a border, a tunnel, or a maritime strait. It is a war over truth, identity, security, and the ability of the free world to identify the enemy without getting confused. This is the moment when every front in the Middle East is testing the other. Hormuz is testing Washington. Lebanon is testing Israel. Gaza is testing the IDF. And Iran is testing whether the world is still afraid of it enough. So are we on the way to an agreement that will stop the Iranian access, or to a temporary ceasefire that will give it time to prepare for the next blow? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And in the meantime, keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to click on the subscribe button so to stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Keep looking for us on our social media accounts, Mati Shoshani and Yair Pinto. And above all, I'm calling on you to pray for the situation, because I believe that God is listening and acting. When you pray, make it personal. Pray for the people behind the headlines. Pray for the Iranian people. They need your help now, as the regime is gaining more money and support and trying to crack internally against any kind of opposition. Pray for the people of Lebanon to have the strength to get their country back from the Iranian colonizer terrorist organization Hezbollah that took over their country. Pray for the people of Israel and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray also for our team at TBN Israel, for their families, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.